part of our committee, and we're just grateful that we're able to provide these programs at Temple Beth Am, particularly during these moments and days and months, and it's feeling like it's going to be a year of safety and isolation. So I'd now like to invite Carol Flicker to share a few words. It's been a pleasure working with her and everyone, our entire committee.
Well, thank you, Susan. I just want to thank the members of the committee. They were Ronnie Bransford, Janet Kelfer, Susan Rosenthal, Judy Cowan, Gania Newhouse, Aida Litauer, Delia Grossman, Andrea Levine, Susan Lampin, and Neil Litauer. And that's it for me.
I think I'm up now.
Yes.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Levine. Many or most of you probably know that I am the program director at Temple Beth Am. But what you might not know about me is that I actually have a master's degree in Jewish education. And what moved me to pursue that as a career path was my connection to Israel and my experiences in Israel. And I always really thought that that was the direction I was going to go. Israel education and advocacy, this is my passion. But the longer I studied in this field, I started to realize that my actual passion was more connected to Jewish identity and to the things that sort of trigger our Jewish identity and make us feel connected to Jewish community and to feeling Jewish. So while Israel was a part of it, it wasn't necessarily specific to Israel. It was sort of all of it. And when we were having these initial committee meetings about doing this Yiddish program, I saw something kind of magical happen even on Zoom. Magic can happen on Zoom. Amongst the committee members of the way we were all connecting and laughing and sharing memories at just the sound of a Yiddish word. And when you think of triggers, it's like the moment you hear somebody say something in Yiddish, you automatically, if you are an Ashkenazi Jewish person, you automatically feel connected to them. You feel like this person gets me. And it triggers a lot of memories. So for me, when I think of Yiddish, I think of two things primarily. I think of Mike Myers and I think of my Aunt Dorothy. So I think of Mike Myers because, as you all, I hope, have seen, Mike Myers portrayed the iconic role of Linda Richman on Saturday Night Live, and an ongoing skit through much of the 90s. And what was hilarious, it was based on his mother-in-law, his Jewish mother-in-law. And one of the things that was most hilarious about this skit was half of the words that he was using were not actually Yiddish. They were just nonsense. He was kind of using, he would say things like, Spilkies in my Genektikazoink. Now, I could be wrong and the professor can correct me, but I'm pretty sure Genektikazoink is not actually a Yiddish word, but at the same time, everybody knew exactly what he was trying to say. And that's something really powerful about Yiddish, is it's this language that is so emotive and so demonstrative of the culture. But what I really think of Yiddish, I think of my family. I am 1,000,000% Ashkenazi Jewish. On both sides of my family, we came from this village named Slonim in what I believe is now present day Belarus. But I'm a fourth generation American, or I should say North American, because my mom is Canadian. My family's been on this continent for a long time. But when I was a little girl, I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with my Zadie's Aunt Dorothy. And she lived till, we think, well over 100. She always lied about her age, so who knows how old. She could have been 500 for all we knew. She could have been 80. We don't know. But she spoke fluent Yiddish. And when I first started to learn to play the piano, she taught me the song Oifen Pripachuk, which is probably a song I'm guessing a lot of you are familiar with. Oifen Pripachuk, brennt der Feuer und ich tu bis heiß. Und der Rebbe lernt, kleine Kinder lach, dem Aleph Beis. Und der Rebbe lernt, kleine Kinder lach, dem Aleph Beis. So I used to sing that with her all the time, but it was not until this very day, when I was thinking about what I wanted to say tonight, that I actually looked up what it meant. And I'll quickly go through the words of this song. On the hearth a fire burns, and in the house it is warm, and the rabbi is teaching little children the alphabet.
That's a Pripachuk.
See,
What?
children, remember, dear ones, what you learn here. Repeat and repeat yet again. Kometz Aleph O. Listen, children, with great enthusiasm, so I instruct you. He among you who learns Hebrew pronunciation faster, he will receive a flag. Learn, children, don't be afraid. Every beginning is hard. Lucky is the one who has learned Torah. What more does a person need? When you grow older, children, you will understand by yourselves how many tears lie in these letters and how much lament. When you, children, will bear the exile and will be exhausted, may you derive strength from these letters. Look in at them. I just got chills reading that because that is like the most Jewish thing I've ever read in my life. And when I think about things that trigger my Jewish identity, it's this idea of passing things down from generation to generation, Lador Vador, whether it's the alphabet, as in the song, whether it's the stories we tell with that alphabet. That is what I call a trigger for Jewish identity. So I'm so excited to explore this deeper tonight. And I will now pass it off to Janet and Susan Rosenthal for a little game to start us out with.
One moment, please. I've gotten a message that there are people in the waiting room.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
So we'll wait.
Beautiful song, beautiful singing.
Thank you. We can go for it.
No, we've been spotlighted.
Yes, you have.
How are we going to handle this? So we have a little quiz for everybody that's here, but we're going to wait until everybody's in from the waiting room, because once it's a poll that we're going to take, and you're going to have to answer it by answering either A, B, C, or D, and then it's anonymous, so we won't know who's answering what, but we're going to figure out if everybody got the answers right at the end of the poll. So when Andrea goes ahead and puts up the poll, then you'll be able to see it and you'll all be voting on your own. And it looks just like that. Does everybody see that? So go. You'll have what, 2-3 minutes?
I guess you and I should answer it too.
Oh, you want me to?
I don't know.
Okay, why not? Since I've got it in front of me. Usually we don't get that, so that's kind of cool.
So where do we answer that, Susan?
You're going to scroll up and you're going to either pick the A, the B, the C, the D, and you're going to highlight which one you think is the right answer, and I'll turn into a little blue dot. And then you go to number 2 and you do the same thing. And number 3, you do the same thing.
Okay, I don't see the first one yet. I had it, but I don't have it anymore.
I don't.
The Farblungit one, the Farblungit one.
That's number 2.
But
Yeah,
once you click submit, it's going to disappear.
Oh, wait.
If you click submit, it disappears. So
Oh, I hit something, but
you probably hit submit by accident.
Our blungit is get lost. You're lost.
This is a little quiz
all
for
fun.
everybody.
You got to do it.
Okay, everybody do this silently.
I'm going to give it another minute before we reveal the results of the poll.
Sorry, Ruth.
All right. With a few more seconds. Get your votes in now. We've got 15 seconds. Exciting. We have a diversity of
It's
answers.
like so exciting. I can't wait to find out what the answers are from Janet. Yay.
All right, 10 more seconds. Any last takers? All right, so let's see the poll.
So Janet.
Okay, so the answer to number 1 is A, Verblungit. Should we read it through or just give the answers? I guess just give the answers. The answer to number 2 is Verschickert.
Yeah.
D. That's one that I can't say.
It's
And then the
Barschwitz.
last one is B. That Yetta, she's such a piece of kishka. There you go.
That's not used correctly.
Okay, looks like everybody, the majority got them right.
Yiddishkayt is food.
Awesome.
Okay,
Good job, Janet.
thank you, you too.
Hope
Okay, so,
you guys enjoyed that, and on to the program.
okay, we're on to Judy.
So when I read Professor Weinstock's CV, I was totally amazed. He graduated from Yale summa cum laude with a BA in economics and political science, and received his MBA in marketing from Hebrew University of Jerusalem, graduating magna cum laude. He has lived and worked overseas for over 14 years, holding a variety of positions, including Director of International Scientific Relations for the National Academy of Sciences and Humanities in Jerusalem, to most recently Vice President of International Sales and Marketing for Carnival Cruise Lines. Professor Weinstock is not only multicultural, but he's also fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew, and Yiddish, and can converse in French and Italian. He currently teaches courses in marketing management and international marketing at the undergraduate and MBA level, both in English and Spanish at the University of Miami. When he first got on and we were chatting, I told him I was so disappointed what a slacker he seems to be, but I think we could forgive that. I, however, met Professor Weinstock when I took his Melton class, From Sinai to Seinfeld, Jews and Their Jokes. His vast knowledge of Judaism and Yiddish, as well as his sense of humor, made the 10 weeks both educational and entertaining, as I'm sure this evening will be. So it is my pleasure to welcome to Sisterhood's A Night of Yiddishkayt, Jeffrey Weinstock.
Judy, it's delightful to be here with all of you. I want to thank, again, all of the people on the committee. I won't risk leaving somebody out by mentioning the names. So everybody that was said before, thank you for inviting me. I'm especially thankful to Judy Cowan, who just spoke, for bringing this opportunity to my attention. I'm really delighted to be here. And Temple Beth Am is an enormously important presence in the Jewish community in Miami. And I'm very honored to have the opportunity to speak to those of you affiliated with the synagogue. So if you're able to see my screen, my cover screen, just give me a thumbs up if you can. Wonderful. And if at any point during the presentation you're not able to hear me or see, just give a thumbs up. I believe that everybody is muted. We're going to leave it that way for now. That's just from experience at the university. We know if we don't mute people, there's lots of background noise, etc. So we'll get a chance to, there'll be a participation section of the evening a little bit later. So the title of this presentation tonight, and it's very informal, is Things Your Bubby and Zadie Never Told You. Things about Yiddish that might be surprising to you, or maybe not. But I think some of you will be a little surprised. So let's start. 5 myths about Yiddish. Myths about Yiddish. Myth number 1, Yiddish is a dying, almost extinct language. The answer to that is Narishkeit. Narishkeit, everybody knows, I believe, means nonsense. Yiddish is not a dying, almost extinct language. Since the early 2000s especially, 20 years or more, there's been an enormous reawakening of interest in Yiddish in the world. There is actually what's called the Yiddish Renaissance happening not only in this country, but all around the world, even in some very unlikely places. We'll talk about that in a moment. Myth number 2, Yiddish is only spoken by old Jews and the ultra-Orthodox. And the answer to that is Narishkeit, nonsense. There's an explosion in Yiddish being spoken by non-Orthodox, young, diverse, what they're called Yiddishists, people who have learned Yiddish out of love, out of interest for all sorts of reasons, and not necessarily connected to the traditional 2 groups of older Jews and ultra-Orthodox. We even have families raising their children, non-religious families who are choosing to raise their children in Yiddish today, believe it or not. Myth number 3, and I've heard this all the time. Yiddish isn't a real language. It's a dialect with no rules. And you can say things any way you like. The answer to that is Narishkeit. Nonsense. Yiddish is a real language. It is very, very, very detailed. And because it's based on German, as you know, it has Germanic precision. There is very strict syntax, meaning the words have to go in a certain order. There are multiple tenses, like any language, past, present, future, conditional, past perfect, etc. We have a subjunctive, and a subjunctive, I think you're going to laugh at the English translation. This isn't a direct translation of the Yiddish subjunctive. I want you should tell me the truth. And I'm sure that some of you are smiling to yourselves because you may have had older relatives who spoke that way, right? You want I should sit here? You want I should give you a glass of tea? When I first learned the subjunctive in Yiddish, I burst out laughing because I thought, now I understand why everyone talks like that. That's literally the way you say it in Yiddish. You want I should give you something to eat. So subjunctive absolutely exists in Yiddish. There are three cases. And don't worry, there's not going to be a test later. There's a nominative case, an accusative case, and the dative case, which I call the diabolical dative case. Impossible, impossible. Why diabolical? Because feminine nouns look masculine. For example, in the dative case, the word for woman is Frau, connected to Frau in German. So die Frau is the woman with a feminine article. It becomes der Frau, as if she were a man in the dative. It's cuckoo, it's crazy, it's meshuggah. I used to ask my teacher, can't I say it this way instead of that way? She would say, sure, but it would be wrong. My point, my friends, is that Yiddish is an absolute real language. There are rules, just like in English, just like in Spanish, just as in Japanese. Every language has rules. Yiddish is not a dialect. It is a serious, serious language. Myth number 4, and I've heard this very often. Isn't Yiddish basically the same as Hebrew? Narishkeit. Nope, 2 separate languages. I think most people in this room would know this. Hebrew was the language of the Bible. It was also the spoken language of the ancient Hebrews, the Jews of the Bible. Modern Hebrew, of course, is the language of the state of Israel. That's one language. On the other hand, Yiddish. Yiddish, which was the mother tongue of most Eastern European and Central European Jews for centuries. 2 completely different languages. I mean, Yiddish is just one more Jewish language, such as Ladino. Some of you may speak Ladino or be familiar with Ladino. It is the language that Sephardic Jews exiled from Spain in 1492, spoke. Judeo-Arabic is another Jewish language. Judeo-Persian, the community in Iran spoke it. Judeo-Italian, the very, very ancient community, over 2,000 years old in Italy, speaks Judeo-Italian. Yiddish is just one more Jewish language. Now, the reason why people get confused, perhaps, is because both Yiddish and Hebrew are written in the Hebrew alphabet, but they're not the same language. I mean, Spanish and Finnish are written in the same alphabet, and they're not the same language, obviously. Just because you can read Spanish doesn't mean you can read Finnish. Same thing with Hebrew and Yiddish. They're written in the same alphabet, but they are not the same language. That's Narishkeit, that's nonsense. And I think the last myth that people always say to me is, isn't Yiddish just this language that people, parents use when they don't want their children to understand? I think that was the case for many of us. So I always say, Narishkeit, first of all, of course, Narishkeit, nonsense. Albeit, I would say the number 1 most commonly understood phrase in the Yiddish language is Schad die Kinder, quiet. The children are bright, right? Be quiet. That's the first and most famous phrase that I ever learned in Yiddish. And for many people, Yiddish does feel like a secret language, a language that only we speak, people in the tribe, etc. And in Jewish history, Yiddish was, in a sense, for a time, a language that the community could speak when they were feeling endangered, which was a lot of the time, under persecution, which was a lot of the time, and under threat. It was a language that nobody else understood. But Yiddish is not a bunch of funny sounding words and ironic expressions, although there are plenty of funny sounding words and plenty of ironic expressions. It is a language that was spoken in the home, in the workplace, in the market, in the cheder, the school, the yeshiva, the religious academy. It's the language of business. It's a language of gossip. It's a language of love and sex and swindling at community. It's the language of a life. It is a language that an entire people spoke during its entire life. An entire civilization used Yiddish to live fully. And that's what I sort of like to communicate to people. So those are the 5 myths I want to talk about. And I would just say, before we talk a little about the history of Yiddish very briefly, one of the beautiful things and most fascinating things about Yiddish is not only is it a language which is basically like any other language, reflects the whole complexity of the way we lead our lives, the good and the bad, but it also reflects the very specific worldview of those who spoke it, as well as the wanderings of the people who spoke it. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. How does Yiddish reflect the Jewish worldview? In English, we say he's threatening to leave. He's going to throw in the towel. Throwing in the towel is a boxing reference, right? When the boxer wants to quit, he throws in the towel. Well, the Jews in Poland in the 1300s didn't box. So how do you say he's threatening to leave? He's going to throw in the towel? Warf dem get, which means he's throwing the get, the decree of divorce, which you throw at the woman's feet. That it doesn't mean he's getting divorced. When somebody's threatening to leave a job, a party, a situation, you're saying he's throwing the get, because the worldview is a Jewish worldview. Another example, bow-legged. Someone is bow-legged. So bow-legged comes from the world of really archery, doesn't it? Bow and arrow. So the Jews in Poland and Hungary in the 1400s were not practicing archery. So how do you say bow-legged in Yiddish? It's looking through the Jewish prism. How do you say it? You say, Hoben de fies v'merchetipche. So what does that mean? To have legs like a merchetipche. I don't know if any of you know this, but merchetipche, merchatipcha, in Hebrew, which become merchetipche in Yiddish, are Torah cantillation notes. When you read the Torah, if you look on the right-hand side, you have mercha and tipcha. They go like this. So the way you say someone is bow-legged, you say they have feet, legs like a merchatipcha. Because every Jew, certainly every male Jew and many female Jews knew the notes of the Torah. It wasn't this is not a religious statement. When the kids were making fun of a kid in school, they would say he has feet, he has legs like a merchatipcha. It wasn't being religious. It was putting things in through a Jewish prism. And I find that very, very interesting. Another example, how Yiddish reflects the Jewish worldview. Crocodile tears. We know that expression. When you cry, fake tears. Well, the Jews didn't know from crocodiles. So how do you say it? Yosef brides treren. Joseph's brothers' tears. Joseph's brothers in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, threw him in the pit because they hated him, right? And when the father asked, where is he? They say, a wild animal, Torof Taraf Yosef, he tore him apart. They weren't real tears. They were hypocrites. So that's how you say crocodile tears. You say the tears of Joseph's brothers, again, through a Jewish prism. Here's a great one. In English, we say, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. So horses are definitely not kosher. And for most of Jewish history, everybody kept kosher, right? Until about the end of the 19th century, roughly. It was not even fathomable to say I could eat a horse. It literally could not be conceived of. How do you say I'm so hungry I could eat a horse? Hungrig v'noch atonis. Atonis is a corruption of the word ta'anit in Hebrew, which means a fast. Hungrig v'noch atonis. I'm as hungry as after a fast. Yom Kippur, Tanit Esther, Esra b'Tammuz, Asra b'Tevet. In other words, even though you're not after a fast, you put it in a Jewish prism. One or two more, because we have Purim coming up this week. Friday is Purim. We have three little expressions which reflect Purim. In English, we say it's not my cup of tea. Jews drank tea. They absolutely drank tea. But they didn't say, when you want to say, I don't like something, you didn't say it's not my cup of tea. You say, es gefällt mir wie in Purim a dreidel. I like it as much as a dreidel in Purim. We don't use dreidels in Purim, we use them at Hanukkah, right? I don't like it. So that's a Jewish way of saying it's not my cup of tea. Another one, it'll never last. That marriage, it'll never last. That business, it'll never last. What do you say? Es wird halten wie Tones Esther bis Purim. Means that will hold from Tanit Esther to Purim. Why? Tanit Esther is the fast one day before Purim. So this is a very dry, ironic way of saying that marriage is going to last one day. Tanit Esther is literally the day before Purim. So that's really good. And one more about Purim for this week. It fell on deaf ears. We use that expression in English, right? When you speak and the person's not listening to you, right? This is a great way to say it in Yiddish, very colorful way. Sie hat mich gehört wie Haman dem Grager. She listened to me like Haman did the Grager. Haman did not hear the Grager. Haman was already dead by the time we're spinning the Gragers, the noisemakers. So those are three or four or five examples of interesting ways that Yiddish reflects the Jewish worldview. The references are references that Jews would understand. And again, you didn't have to be a rabbi, you didn't have to be a shiva bochar, you didn't have to be a learned man or woman. Everybody knew these references. So let's move on. Where does Yiddish begin? Where was it born? Where does it form? It starts in the 9th or 10th century in Rhineland. Rhineland is a province in Western Germany. You can see the area on the map. It borders France, it borders Luxembourg, and it borders Switzerland. Now, if you look at the map very closely, you'll see how far it is from Eastern Europe. where many of our ancestors were from, I would imagine. Some of your ancestors might have been from Germany, but I'm guessing a lot of them were not. A lot of them were from Poland. We heard Belarus before, Russia. My ancestors from Latvia, on the other side from Hungary, Lithuania, Estonia, I mean, all the Romania. These are very, very far from Germany. So how did Yiddish reach our great, 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 great grandparents? How did they learn it? There's no, it doesn't make any sense. Jews in Rhineland, again, look at the map, in the 9th and 10th century, started to absorb words from the locals, from the non-Jews. They started to absorb basically medieval German words. And they needed it for interactions, for commerce, for trade, for dealing with the authorities. If there were police issues, army issues, they had to learn a little bit of medieval German. And over time, this new language became the Jews' lingua franca, their day-to-day language, their everyday language. Hebrew, which almost every Jew knew from the synagogue, if he had studied a little bit, and from Cheder, that was reserved for study and prayer. You didn't speak Hebrew. You spoke this new language, which wasn't really called Yiddish yet. It was really this medieval kind of German. However, the language had a Jewish twist. Of course, it had a Jewish twist. What was the twist? The speakers of this language, this new language being formed in the 9th and 10th century, they mixed in words from the Jewish past. They mixed in words that they knew from their Jewish life into this German, spoken language. What were the languages of the Jewish past? We all know this. The languages were Hebrew, Aramaic. Aramaic was the spoken language at the time of the turn of the millennium, right? So that's what Jews in the land of Israel and Christians, the Christians who started in the land of Israel as well, that's what they spoke, Aramaic. And these Jews spoke Latin and French and Italian. And the Jews in Germany didn't speak so much Spanish. They didn't, from Spain, they didn't exile to Germany, but they certainly had been in Italy for 2,000 years, and they've certainly been in France as well. And Latin, of course, from their time in Italy. They also spoke Greek. In any case, these languages had words that were mixed into this new language being formed of Yiddish. How does it work? Yiddish becomes this mostly Germanic language with strictly Germanic Teutonic grammar, with other words mixed in and adapted and changed. Let's see a couple of examples. How the Jews took words from their other languages and mixed them in by changing them, right? So Hebrew, Shabbat, Yiddish, Shabbos. And many American Jews and other Jews outside of Israel will say Shabbos, good Shabbos, right? You don't say Shabbat Shalom so much, right? Traditional Jews will say good Shabbos, right? Same word, a couple of letters were changed. A brit, circumcision. American Jews, typically Ashkenazi Jews will say a bris, right? It's just the Yiddish pronunciation of the word brit. You can see the pattern, the T sound becomes an S sound in many, many cases. The word tova, it's also a name, but a tova in Hebrew, tova means a favor, right? In Yiddish, toive, a toive. So you hear the vowel change in both cases. So in fact, many of you may know the expression from your parents or grandparents, tut me a toive, right? Do me a favor, please, tut me a toive, do me a favor. Tova to toive. Yom Tov in Hebrew comes yantif, which means a holiday, right? And you know that expression people say on Rosh Hashanah, on Pesach, good yantif, right? Good yantif. It means Yom Tov. Again, just an adaptation of the words from Hebrew. Okay. As someone who's native and primary language is Yiddish, there's a clear distinct difference in Yiddish and taught and learned with Yiddish as one as both. We'll talk about that. It's a very good question, Amy. We'll talk about that in a moment when we get to the Q&A section. It's a very important question. Okay, a couple more things. We talked about words being mixed in from Latin. Now, you're going to be surprised at this. These are some words that are mixed in from the Latin roots into Yiddish. So we have a word in Latin, benedicere, means to bless. You may know the word benedict or benedictus comes from that. There's a very common Yiddish word that comes from this word, and that is to bench. Bench, we bench after the end of a meal, which means to bless. We bench Licht, you bless the lights on Friday night. The reason I put the German, which is Senyen, is because you see how far it is from German. Yiddish is not always based on German. This word bench is an incredibly important word, it comes right from Latin. Another word from Latin, divine, divinitus, which means holy and divine, right? Holy and sacred. In Yiddish, to daven, to pray. It means to pray, to daven. It comes from the word for divine. And again, I put the word in German, beten, right? Which has a very different meaning in Yiddish, nothing to do with praying. And to see that, again, words came from Latin, but they were adapted. benedicere becomes bench, divine becomes daven. Another one, gentil, gentil, right, which means noble, gentil and gentille, in French, noble, right? In Yiddish, you might be surprised, Yentl, which is a very important name and also a movie that we all love. Okay, it's from the French. A couple of words about the books in Yiddish. Books, of course, we are the people of the book, very important things. The oldest Yiddish book on record is a Machzor, which in Yiddish is a Machzer, from Worms. Worms is a city in that part of Germany called Rhineland from 1272. We still have record of that book. So people were already writing in Yiddish in 1272. In the 14th and 15th century, we see songs and stories already being written in Yiddish. Of course, there were songs and stories being told for hundreds of years, but they're only written down in Yiddish in the 14th, 15th century. In the 16th century, of course, you all know the printing press was developed, which gave people a much easier and quicker way and cheaper way to publish and disseminate books. And why do I talk about that? Because this is very important. Very impactful book was the Book of Bovo. In English, it's called Bevis. Some of you may know this if you read medieval English literature, if that's your hobby. So Bovo d'Antona was an Italian legend, published in 1507. It's a very famous, popular book all over Europe with non-Jews, stories of knights, and it's sort of like the Knights of the Round Table. It started in Italy. All over Europe, people read it in Russia and in Poland and in France and Italy. It's very, very famous. And this was the first, probably the first non-religious book printed in Yiddish in 1541, the Book of Bovo. And just so you know, it's still in print today, 500 years later, almost 500 years later. It's the 40th edition, still in Yiddish. Now, what may surprise you, the name of the book in Yiddish is the Bovo Buch. Buch means book, right? The Bovo Buch. There is a very strong theory that the word Bubamaises, that many of you know, comes from Bovo and not from Bubby, not from grandma. There's there's pretty good evidence that it comes from that. Because it was a story, the book was a story of very fanciful tales that had nothing to do with Bubby and grandma. So I think that's very interesting as well. Let's move on really quickly. Women, I'll talk about women for a bit. I mean, this is obviously a women's event for the most part. Women often did not read Hebrew. They were not educated to read Hebrew, but they did read Yiddish. Again, Yiddish is written in Hebrew letters. Just because you read Spanish doesn't mean you read Finnish, right? I want to stress that. You read Yiddish does not mean you can read Hebrew. Absolutely not, okay? Women did not get schooled in Hebrew for the most part. We're talking about the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, etc. The most famous book for women in Yiddish is called Seno Reno. It was published in the 1590s. Probably the most important book for women ever written in Yiddish, and probably the most important Jewish book ever written. It's a book of the Parshat HaShavua, the weekly Torah portion, interpretations of it, as well as a lot of spiritual and moral religious teachings. It was the most beloved book of a Jewish woman in Eastern Europe for hundreds of years. I will tell you that all of your grandparents or great-grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers had this book. From girlhood to old age, they treasured it. Almost every woman, almost every Jewish home in Europe had this book. And it was the book that most impacted women's religious education. Here's a copy of it. It's very interesting. We won't spend a lot of time in this. This is one of the first editions. This is, those of you who read Hebrew, you can see that the top is in Hebrew, the middle's in Yiddish, and the bottom is in Russian. So right there, I find that fascinating. That's Jewish history, right, in a nutshell, right? My belief is that probably the top of it was written for the man of the house, who was the one who went out and bought it for his woman, his wife, his daughter, his sister, his mother. The middle part is written in Yiddish to explain what it's about. And then the bottom, this is from Zhitomir, by the way. You can read that if you read the Hebrew letter, Zhitomir in red. That's a place in Ukraine today. The bottom is in Russian for those who were able to read Russian as well. I think that's fascinating. It's fascinating artifact here. This is Sena Urena. For all Jewish women read this. How did our ancestors learn Yiddish? Your ancestors and mine from Eastern Europe, they migrated from Germany to Eastern Europe. Slowly, Jews moved eastward. There were no Jews in Poland and Russia originally. The Jews were not there. The Jews migrated 800 years ago, and they took the language with them. Of course, you take your language wherever you go. And at that point, Yiddish started to be known as Mamaloshen. Mamaloshen is a word that I believe many of you have probably heard. Mamaloshen literally means mother tongue. That is kind of the unofficial name for Yiddish. What I find beautiful about that is that the name of the language is in two languages. Mame is German for mother, and Loshen is Hebrew, Lashon, for tongue. So isn't it fitting that a language which is made up of different languages has a name made up of different languages? I find that very, very interesting, very beautiful. How else could it be, right? Okay, they mixed in new languages as they migrated. And again, I always think of like Spanglish we hear in Miami, like people saying el rofero for the roofer, el plomero for the plumber. And my plumber said the other day, liquear, to leak. That's not Spanish. You all know that's not Spanish, right? And so Jews did the same thing. They stuck in words from the countries that they had moved to, and they made them into Yiddish words, okay? I have a letter that my late grandfather wrote to a relative in Latvia. She showed it to me after his death. And he said he was very proud. He wrote to her in Yiddish, right? But he'd been in the US already 50 years. And he was very proud because his daughter, my mother, had a house, a big house with a big swimming pool. He wrote that in Yiddish, a swimming pool. That's not Yiddish. Okay. So which languages did the Jews take on, and where did they get new words from? Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian. Those are the languages that our ancestors spoke. So here's a couple of words that are purely Yiddish words today, but you listen to the sounds, you know that they are Slavic words. Ciekawe. Ciekawe is a word for curious. And there's a perfectly good German word for curious. The word is neugierig. But in Yiddish, most people say ciekawe. So the word for skot is spudnice. Tell me that doesn't sound Russian, spudnice. And I know there are some Russian speakers on the call that may or not be the word that's used today for skirt. The word for omelet is prezhenice. That's purely Slavic. And one other word that's used all the time is zhe. Zhe is thrown in all the time in Yiddish. It's a word to emphasize. It's like, so tell me, zog mir zhe, like tell me, okay, zhe, yeah. It's just a word, and that's purely Slavic. Again, this is something that immigrants do. Immigrants take the words of the country. So only in the 18th century, did the name of the language be known as Yiddish. And what does it mean? Yiddish means Jewish. Yiddish doesn't mean a language. Yiddish is the adjective for Jewish, a Jewish man, a Jewish woman, you say Yiddish. So the name of the language is really saying, I'm speaking Jewish. And in fact, there are some very old people in the US, when you ask them what languages they speak, they say, I speak English and I also speak Jewish. Because they're translating Yiddish. Today, 70%, this is basically where we are, 70% of Yiddish is medieval German, 20% is Hebrew, and 10% is Latin and Slavic, which are adapted, as we said. I'll move very quickly. Very interesting, we have something called lexical equivalence. So we have the same word twice in Yiddish. Use a German word for everyday use and a Hebrew word for adapted use. What do I mean? Here's an example. A normal book is called a Buch. That's German. If it's a religious book, it's called a sefer. Why? In Hebrew, it's a sefer. So in Yiddish, it's a sefer. A teacher, in Yiddish, is called a lehrer. That's from German. But if he's a religious teacher, he's a malamed. That's from Hebrew. A synagogue, sorry, not a synagogue, a shul. A shul can be a synagogue, it also means a school. Shul is a school, but a religious school is a cheder. Cheder is a Hebrew word, excuse me. It means a room. And finally, one of my favorite examples, heiraten. Heiraten is a very good German word to get married. No one says that in Yiddish anymore. What they say is chasana haben, to have a chasana, which is the Hebrew word for corrupted for the word for marriage. Some of you have heard that, like a chasan, right? There's a groom. All right, let's move on. We're just kind of running out of time. In the US, we threw in new words, new vocabulary, and new reality. Yiddish speaking immigrants faced a new reality in the US. They had to talk about things they never had to talk about. So they made things like a boychik. You've all heard this expression about boychik. What does that mean? It's English and Yiddish, right? Boychik. We have der border. A border. It was very common for unmarried Jewish men to live as a boarder in a family's house. He was der border. That became a Yiddish word. And you even have something called the shop poet. It's a whole movement in Yiddish poetry in the early 1900s. A lot of people worked in the garment industry, as you know, in shops and sweatshops. And there's a movement of poetry, beautiful poetry of labor activists called the shop poet. And that's Yiddish. That's clearly Yiddish. A couple of quick examples. This is a poster from World War I. You can see the motif is Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty. And it says, Jews, can you promise us you're going to buy a Liberty Bond? And those of you who read Hebrew can see in the second line, it says, Kauft a Liberty Bond. Buy a Liberty Bond. And underneath the statue, it says Liberty Loan Committee in New England, written in Yiddish and Hebrew letters, right? So that's clearly bringing in American influence. This is also from World War I. This was encouraging people to save food and not to waste food. They say, you escaped from hunger, now we have to be good Americans and save food. And you look at the very bottom, if you read it in Hebrew, United States Speisverwaltung, which means the United States Wheat Association. But again, there's a word for United States in Yiddish. It's not United States, but they incorporated that into their Yiddish. Here's a great one. This is from Tel Aviv. This is a very famous comic duo in Yiddish in Tel Aviv in the 1950s, Hebrew and Yiddish, 2 different languages. One of my favorites in Buenos Aires from 1924. Huge Yiddish-speaking community. One of the centers of Yiddish in the world was Buenos Aires. They had a show. If you look on the square on the left, you can see Una Madre del Otro Mundo. This is the name of a play, A Mother from the Other World. And right beneath it in Yiddish, A Mama von jener Welt. So my favorite part, if you look at the upper left-hand corner, upper left, where it says Orfeón Español, to the left of that, it says in Yiddish, Piedras 534, which was the address. That's a street in Buenos Aires. They spelled it out in Yiddish letters on the upper left. I have this poster in my room. This is Molly Pecan. Hoy es dos a Mädel. Hoy es dos a Mädel. And in Spanish, ay que muchacha. I have this poster actually in my study. So Molly Pecan played very often in Buenos Aires in the Yiddish theater. Great syncretism, mixture of Yiddish and Spanish. There are about 1 million Yiddish speakers in the world today. Pre-World War II, about 11 to 13 million. 85% of the Jews killed in the Holocaust were Yiddish speakers, so about 5.2 million of the 6 million were Yiddish speakers. Most survivors, those who survived, have died since then, of course, because it's been about 75 years. In addition, those who emigrated earlier, like our grandparents or great-grandparents, or even our parents, have subsequently died. So that's another reason why the numbers are so small. However, as I mentioned, there's a huge renaissance, and even some non-Jews are into Yiddish. So we're going to end with this. We're going to end right now with this last part, which I think you're really going to enjoy. We have a request to slow down a bit. Okay, sure. I wanted to make sure we got everything, but I will speak slower. One last myth. Only Jews speak Yiddish. Nope, Yiddishkayt. Not true. There are many, many non-Jews who speak Yiddish without even knowing it. There are so many words from Yiddish that have entered the common parlance, the common lexicon, the common English language. Often they don't mean what they think they mean, though. So let's look at a couple. So mishugas, which is often mispronounced as mishigas, that's okay. A lot of these words were kind of over the years have kind of deformed. So craziness or foolishness. What I love is that even Chris Matthews and Rachel Maddow, neither of whom is Jewish, use it. They use it beautifully. They use it perfectly, mishigas. Chutzpah, often pronounced as chutzpah. It's chutzpah, right? So we all know what that means. I mean, you know what? If we want to open our mute, we can unmute people. If you want to unmute yourself, that would be fine. I think you can. Hopefully you can unmute yourself. If not,
Yeah, you all should be able to unmute.
okay, great. Thank you. So chutzpah means what? What's the word in English for chutzpah? Chutzpah?
Sort of nerve.
Pushy.
Nervy.
Pushy.
Yeah. Goal, right.
He's muted.
Yeah, you got muted.
There are plenty of words in English for chutzpah, nerve, gall, cheekiness, but we still say chutzpah. Even non-Jews use it. Another word, kibbutz. What does to kibbutz mean?
Joke around.
Talk, gossip.
Joke around or to gossip, right? It also means something else, to make unwanted comments during a card game. That kibbutz comes from kibbutz. It's the same word, to group together. But the truth is, it's actually probably not. There's a word in German which is kiebtzen, which means to look on, to be an onlooker. And I want to tell you that already in the 1920s, non-Jewish Americans saying to kibbutz. Typically, when you're playing bridge with somebody and someone's like nudging you and telling you to do what to do, that's the kibbutz. Okay, let's move on to nudge. None of you ever heard of
Bother.
Bother. To bother. Yeah.
Bother.
Annoy.
Annoy or to pester. Where does it come from? It comes from nudgen, which means to bore somebody, not to annoy, to bore somebody. And in Polish, it's nuda.
Is Yiddish?
Nudge is Yiddish. Not to nudge, to push, but to nudge. It's a very different thing between nudging and nudging.
Nudge.
I think we'll do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm on.
So yes, I'm hearing everybody. So it comes from the word for boring, not to be annoying, but to be bored, which is something quite different. And I want to show you a little book that was written recently. Two Jewish economists, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, very famous economists. They wrote this thing called Nudge. They should have spelled it Noodge.
Cass Sunstein, yeah.
But they spelled it nudge. And this is a very, very mainstream book. I mean, in other words, non-Jews know what to nudge means, right? A schlub.
It can also be a noun or a verb, nudge. I've heard it used as a noun also.
That's how we use it in English, correct. A schlub?
Yeah.
Kind of a sloppy guy, kind of.
A schlep.
A schlub is a
Yeah.
loser, unattractive person. What's interesting is that people often define it using other Yiddish words like a schmo or a schlump or a
A
schnuck.
bogvan.
People define the Yiddish word often using other Yiddish words, which I think is interesting. What's interesting also is that this is not related, a schlub is not related to a slob. A slob is a word from Gaelic. It has nothing to do with schlub. Very different word. Okay, let's move on. Yes, girls in Europe learned to write Yiddish. They did. They read and write it. What else? A schmuck. So we know it means a jerk.
Yeah.
We all know what it means. We all know what it means literally. We won't discuss that in detail. Male genitals. Actually, probably comes from the Polish word for snake. We'll just leave it at that. Fegele?
Gay.
A homosexual.
Bird. It means bird.
A gay man.
It's a derogatory name for a gay man, and it really means a little bird, right? Okay. I think a lot of non-Jews don't know that. Maybe Jews know that. Bobala. So bobala is really bobale. In America, we say bobala, but it's not. It means darling, honey, or dear. As you all know, the LEH suffix is a diminutive, mamale, tatale, and of course, our new vice president, Kamale. Right? What's interesting is that we call little boys and girls bubala, which means little grandma. And that's very interesting. Why? The theory is, it's the same thing like in Spanish, we call little boys papito, right? Which means little daddy, right? Why? The hope is that they will grow up to be grandparents and parents one day. And I'll tell you, one thing that's very curious, very curious is that even little boys are called mamale in Yiddish. It's totally appropriate.
It's tatele.
Mamale.
Yeah,
little boys are mamale also, literally. It's absolutely acceptable. Little boys are
Always Shayna Bubala.
Dana Bubala even better than Bubala, right?
It
Okay,
should be
yeah.
tatele.
Gossip. Gossiper.
But not because of why you think, not why you think.
Genta the matchmaker.
Nope.
Yeah, I was gonna say a matchmaker.
Nope.
Ganta is gossip.
Nope.
And
No. To talk to her.
Genta does mean gossip, but not for the reason that you think. Not because of Fiddler on the Roof. There was a famous character in a very famous series of sketches in the 20s called Yenta Telebenda, and she was a real battle axe. Long before people knew about Yenta the matchmaker. Long before. Yenta Telebenda is a symbol of being a gossip and a busybody.
That's funny.
Let's move on quickly. Bubkiss. We in English we say bubkiss, but it's bobkiss.
Less than zero.
Nothing.
Zero.
Zero. Yes, nothing.
So often it's used for nothing, like insignificant amount of money. It's bubkiss, right? It means it's nothing. There's two meanings. It actually comes from the word for beans, but it really comes from the word in Yiddish for goat or horse droppings, which is even worse than beans. Drek, another lovely word.
Feces.
Dirty.
Drek means garbage. Drek means garbage. It doesn't mean crap. It means garbage. Right? Literally feces. It means garbage or trash. Same thing as German. Same exact word in German. Verkackte, right? So the real word, the correct pronunciation is verkackte. In English, often people say verkackte, right? So a lot of the R's get dropped, especially people from the Northeast drop their R's. So we know where that comes from, right? Terrible, lousy, crappy, literally crappy. It means something that's crapped upon, literally kacken, right?
The verkackte idea.
The idea means a crappy, lousy idea. A glitch.
Pooped on.
A glitch is a mishap or a malfunction.
That was Yiddish.
Comes from Yiddish very clearly. Glitchen means to slip or to slide. When you slip on the ice, it's glitchen. Absolutely, 100%. No people don't know that. A couple more. A ganef.
Thief.
A thief.
Where does it come from?
In Hebrew.
I'm silencing.
Correct. It comes from Hebrew, the word ganav, right? Very good. A lot of non-Jews will use that word, especially in cities where there are large Jewish populations. Kanahara.
Curse.
Evil eye.
Evil eye.
Keep the evil eye away.
Evil eye.
Tut, tut, tut.
Kinda. So the word is really kinehore. Americans just say kanahara, which is fine. It's totally fine. It's kinehore. It really means nothing bad should happen from me mentioning something good, right? That's what it means. Where does it come from? It's a corruption of the word kain ein hore, which means in Hebrew kain ein hara, which means there should be no evil eye. You're right, evil eye. But it's interesting where it comes from. It's Yiddish with Hebrew in one expression. Okay. Okay, very good. And by the way, what is it usually followed by when we say kanahara? What comes next?
Tut, 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 tut.
Poo, poo, poo. Sometimes.
They do that in Greek too.
Yeah.
So many cultures spit 3 times. Correct. Bench?
Complainer.
Complain.
Complainer. Complainer.
None of us ever do that, right? Kvetch, where does it come from? Where does kvetch come from? Kvetchen means to squeeze. To squeeze. And what's interesting is that when you go on the Yiddish internet, and there are plenty of sites on the Yiddish internet, to click, give a click here means you say kvetch, give a kvetch here.
Kvetcher. It's the clicker.
When you click on a website, like click here, it's kvetch. One more thing I want to tell you, the funniest story I ever heard, talk about cultures mixing. I have a friend who went to Mexico, and he was in a kosher supermarket. And he heard an old woman saying to her daughter, no te kvetches. He invented a Spanish verb, kvecharse, from kvetch in Yiddish. I thought that was the funniest thing I ever heard. No te kvetches.
What does that mean in Spanish?
Don't kvetch. They're just in a Spanish conjugation.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In a Spanish conjugation, right? Okay, let's move on quickly. Megillah. The whole Megillah.
Long story.
Long story.
The story comes from the Hebrew Megillah, biblical story. I'm going to read this week the Megillah of Ruth. It's also the name of a beloved cartoon character, Megillah Gorilla. Who, by the way, was invented by non-Jews. Hanna-Barbera were Italian Americans. They were not Jewish. So this shows how widespread the use of Yiddish was even among non-Jews, right?
And we usually say the ganze Megillah. That's what I always say.
That's Yiddish, but I'm saying non-Jews will say Megillah. Even Hanna-Barbera, you knew Yiddish enough to create that. In Yiddish, we'd say the ganze Megillah, the whole story. Right? Nebish? A poor suffering person. By the way, just so you know, non-Jewish Americans have used that since the 1800s.
Wow.
And it's from Yiddish. The word Yiddish is nebech. It was corrupted into nebish in English. Oy vey.
Oh my God.
So what's interesting is where it comes from. It literally means oh, woe. Woe is think of the word. Woe and vey are the same word. W is a V in German. It means oh, woe. Is me. Correct. Then there's of course oi gewalt. By the way, it's not gewalt with the T, it's with the D, gewalt, which means oh, violence. Gewalt means violence. And when you scream, when Yiddish-speaking Jews scream gewalt, it means I'm being attacked.
Wow.
Okay, that's what it means. It's gewalt, not gewalt. Okay? So if a woman, God forbid, was being attacked or a man was being robbed, he would scream gewalt, gewalt. It doesn't mean your child is marrying a non-Jew. It doesn't mean you're losing your business. It means that's when you'll gewalt.
So why do people say gewalt with a T? That's how I learned it.
Why do people say fakakte without the R? Why do people say water? Why do people say water and not water?
Is it from New York?
Yeah, let's move on. Verklempt, which is mispronounced verklempt.
Overwhelmed.
Overcome with emotion.
Yes.
Right? It's derived from the word for being pressed. When someone grips you to their chest, they are verklempt. You grip your coat to your chest, you're verklempt. Okay.
Where does the word
Gornish.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Where does it come from? So gornish is a word that Gornish is a word that
Nothing.
Nothing.
Gornish is a word that many non-Jews will use, but do you know where it comes from?
Either one.
Means truly not. Gor nicht means truly not. Non-Jews will use it all the time. That's how much Gornish has entered the English language. Goyish.
Halavai.
Non-Jew.
Non-Jew.
So,
Non-Jew.
yeah, so hold on one second. Halavai is a
The
Yiddish
nation.
word. It
Nation.
comes from the Hebrew, but non-Jews would not know that. A typical non-Jew would not know that word. It's too esoteric. Okay? Halavai means if only, like ochala in Spanish, if only, right? But it's not a word that it's not.
Nation.
Where does halavai come from?
Halavai is not on this list. It means if only because it's not a word that non-Jews would use. This is
Aramaic. It comes from the Aramaic.
That is correct. It's a correct, an Aramaic word which made its way into Hebrew. That's correct. So Goyish means not Jewish. It means very, very, very non-Jewish, right?
Yeah.
But it really just means Gentile. It is not a stigma. It is not a disrespect. We're just non-Jewish.
But when you say Gorishikov, is a way of degrading.
So people use it, but it's not what it means. That's what I'm saying. It's not what it means. People use it in a certain way. That's not really what it means. Correct. It just means a non-Jew, a Gentile. Right. Klutz.
Not coordinated.
Clumsy.
Clumsy.
It actually means a wooden beam. Correct. It means clumsy. It means a wooden beam. It actually may have come from German, not from Yiddish, but I thought we're almost done. So a little bit more. A macher.
Big shot.
Big
Yeah.
shot.
It literally means a doer or a maker. It just means someone who does something or makes something.
Macher.
We've turned it into big macher, right? A größer macher. Schmooze.
Talk.
What we're doing.
Gossip.
Schmooze is to have a conversation, to chit chat. It's an actual, this is a literal Jewish word. Shmuasin means to chat, to chit chat. It's literally the word. Most non-Jews have no idea that it comes from Yiddish.
The miracle of
Stop.
halavai.
Literally means to push. When you push the door, you stop. When you push the door, you stop the door. This means to push. That's all. We'll just leave it at that. It's not a vulgar word. It's not a vulgar word. Shlemiel?
A fool.
Smart.
A fool.
Where does it come from? Where does it come from?
Laverne and Shirley.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew someone was going to say that.
It just came out. I love you so much. I'm sorry.
Where does it come from?
Much TV.
German.
It comes from Shalom Mo'il in Hebrew, one who's good for nothing. Shalom Mo'il. Shalom Mo'il. Then we have the Shlamazel. Where does that come from?
Somebody who has bad luck.
Shalom.
Shlim Mazel. Shlim Mazel means lousy luck in German. There's one more.
Yeah.
A Shmegegi.
A jerk.
Also a fool.
Yeah.
Also a fool or an idiot. It comes from the word for baloney or bunk or nonsense. And I'm just going to end with that. I mean, the last thing. I'm going to end with the famous story. The difference between a shlemiel, a shlamazel, and a shmegegi.
Yeah.
I mean, the shlemiel spills the soup. The shlamazel gets the soup spilled on him. The shmegegi is the one who has to clean it up.
Ashayn him down.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So,
That was fun.
That was lovely. Yeah. Thank you.
A lot of fun.
That's a wonderful.
I hope you know that one of the people here tonight is Norma Sauls, who teaches Yiddish. Is Norma there? Can you say hello?
not anymore. She's not here anymore.
She teaches Yiddish.
We're actually going to move to our Q&A section right now, which Genya is going to lead for us.
Genya, would you like to mute everybody? Genya, sorry. Would you like to mute everybody perhaps and then just unmute the people who are speaking? Maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and mute. You guys go for it and I'll take care of the muting.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Professor. And I've been keeping track of a few of the questions that people have been posting. And Eda's comment is a perfect leeway to the first question that we have that was from Sharon. And she asked, what's the best way to start learning Yiddish?
That's a great question. I mean, I'll tell you from my own experience. So I took a course. There are plenty of places to take courses, either in person. We have places in Miami, if you're located in Miami, as I know most of you are. Plenty of frameworks. Ali at the University of Miami teaches Yiddish. There is also the Workman's Circle, which is, or now called the Workers' Circle online. Many of you may know it from your childhood, the Workman's Circle. They teach courses online. I am taking now, I have a private teacher whom I take a course from every week. I also take a course once a week via Zoom in Paris. There's a very, very famous Yiddish school in Paris, one of the most famous schools in the world. I take a course on Zoom once a week. So there's many, many, many places, but I think a course is really the best way. If you want to learn a few funny expressions, that's one thing. If you want to really learn the language, how to speak it, how to write it, how to read it, how to understand it, speak it correctly, you need to take a course.
That's right. Like a serious language that you have spoken about. Marty wanted to ask you if you have seen Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish and if you had read Harry Potter in Yiddish, and what do you think about that?
Great, that's a great question. So the first part, yes, absolutely. I flew to New York just to see it. I loved it, made me cry. It was just beautiful. I will tell you that the Yiddish translation is excellent. It was a little fast for me. My Yiddish is quite good, but it was a little fast. I had to read the subtitles a little bit just to keep up with this. They spoke very quickly. But since then, I've studied I bought the soundtrack of all the songs in Yiddish, and it has the lyrics in a little booklet. And so I've studied all the lyrics, and it's beautifully translated. It's a fantastic translation with a lot of humor. I have not read Harry Potter in Yiddish, and I'll tell you why, because I never read it in English. I'm not really into that kind of fiction, so I never read it. But I have heard it is there, and I have friends and fellow Yiddish students who have read it and who loved it.
Well, I remember when I was a little girl, my parents had a recording of Fiddle on the Roof in Yiddish even back then. And that's the first time that I heard it was in Yiddish. And then I thought the English was a translation. And it turns out that the English is the original. So go mished around in circles. Amy made a comment, and I wanted you to address this. And she says that she grew up with Yiddish, and that there's a difference in the Yiddish that is taught and learned versus the Yiddish that one is brought up with. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. It's a very long, complicated answer. I'll tell you sort of, in shorthand. So there are three dialects, three variants of Yiddish, depending on where you were from, right? Often people talk about Galicianers and Litvaks. That may be a division you have heard about in your own family, but there are actually three types of Yiddish. And the Yiddish that is spoken in the three areas of Eastern Europe differs in different ways. So some people have an I instead of a U. Some people say shul, other people say shil, some people say kugel, other people say kigel, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the characteristics of one of the variants of Yiddish. And there's another variant as well. Those three are classic variants of Yiddish. They're all correct. They're all proper Yiddish. They're not colloquial. They're not mistaken. They're not jargon or slang. About 90 years ago, more than that, close to 100 years ago, YIVO is the most important institution in the world, started in Eastern Europe before the war, was transplanted to the United States just before the war, and now has branches around the world. YIVO made a ruling based on its assembly, that a vote of all the Yiddish speaking organizations, that they were going to teach that standard Yiddish is something called Klal Yiddish. Klal Yiddish is standard Yiddish, and that is the Yiddish that shall be taught in school. And so therefore, everyone who studies Yiddish in school, not only now, but already starting, 80 years ago, was supposed to have learned standard Yiddish. And that is a Yiddish that is absolutely taught for the last, 80, 90 years. You're totally correct, Amy, that is probably not the Yiddish that you grew up with and the words that you heard, which could be because of two things, either because your family was from a different part of Europe than where Klal Yiddish was, more predominant, and et cetera, but also because over time, the words got corrupted. As I showed in my slides, you know, Bobe became Booby, right? And Bobkis became Bupkis with a P and an I instead of a B and an E. And what else? Schmuck, excuse the word, became Schmuck, or become A. So the words that in the families over the, you know, again, sorry, the words, farkakte becomes fakakte. The words get corrupted over the years because of people's accents and where they're living, right? So that may be, I think that the reason that the Yiddish you're hearing and the Yiddish that you're seeing are slightly different for those two reasons. Klal Yiddish, which is what is taught, and the Yiddish that may have changed over the years in your family.
So if I could say a word, this is Mel, this is Amy's husband. I'm hearing feedback, voice, so it's difficult to speak.
Just go ahead.
But yeah, I'm the one that was brought up Yiddish at my native tongue. That was the spoken language, that was my primary language. And I noticed during the talk, Professor, the difference between the Yiddish that you were describing and the Yiddish that I was brought up with, just to give you a few examples. When you would say nach, N-O-C-H, I was brought up with noch. When you would say das, I was brought up with dus, D-U-S.
Dos. No, I never say das, I would say dos, if anything.
But mine was more dus with the U, a stronger U. When you would say kind of horror, in my growing up, it was always kind of horror. And I know you mentioned that. Gornished was to me always with the strong U, gornished. Shainim, a shainim punim was never used. That would always be a shainim punim. So I just wanted to point out that
I'm going to guess that Mel, I'm going to guess that perhaps that your family was from Lithuania or the Baltic states, perhaps.
My parents were in the Holocaust. They came from Poland. My mother was from
Where in Poland, though? Where in Poland, though?
Oh, my mother came from Lodz, and my father from a small town called Zawiercie, which is a little dot on a map. But they emigrated here, and that was the language I was brought up with. You know, that's my native tongue.
So again, I think that a lot of the variants that you're mentioning are really sort of Eastern Polish, close to Litvish Yiddish, right? I think that's what I'm hearing. I have to hear it a little bit more, but it's absolutely common. I mean, you will find when I have the opportunity to speak to very, very, very old Jews who spoke Yiddish as a native tongue, not grew up with it in the house, but they literally grew up in Europe speaking it. I have to really, really concentrate because a lot of them, the survivors, were from areas where they spoke one of the other two variants. So it's very, very common. And of course, there's a challenge because what do you teach? What do you teach? So the decision was made 90 years ago, before the Holocaust, that what would be taught would be Klal Yiddish, which is kind of the neutral kind of Yiddish. But it does not negate, it doesn't mean that one Yiddish is better than the other. It doesn't mean that one is inferior, by no means, by no means.
Well, thank you. Great program.
You know, a lot of people grew up, especially in this country, knowing their grandparents would say things and they would kind of go along, but never knew exactly what they meant. So I have an example of that question that comes from Pamela. And she says that her grandfather lovingly threatened Shechaga, the kids, when they didn't bring him liver and onions, which obviously he must have loved. And what does it mean? Like, a lot of people grew up hearing certain words and really not knowing and laughing at them, but they don't know what it means. Do you know what that one means in particular for Pamela?
I've never heard that word Shechaga. The only thing I can think of is maybe over the years it's been deformed and heard, and it could be shchite, which has to do with slaughtering, like a shoifet. Maybe he said, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to slaughter you, kidding around. I'm lovingly, I'm going to kill you, shchita instead of shchiga. That's the only thing I think of. Shchaga, I do not recognize that word.
Chaga means to kill. It's used also. Well, I grew up in Montreal, and my family came from somewhere in near the Ukraine, Moldova, or whatever it's called now. And Hagart means to kill.
No, that's something different. That's something different. Harget, which would be Harget. Absolutely. Hargenen. Absolutely. But there's no sh sound, and there's no ca. There's no sh and there's no ch. It's harget, not shchaga. I don't see the connection there. Unless again it's misheard or misremembered, which could be. But harget. Ich will like hargenen. Hargenen. I'm going to harget you, not shchaga. But there's no sh and there's no ch. It's a ha and not a sh. So I don't know.
And just one final question before I turn it to closing this wonderful program that we had tonight. And Andrea had asked if you are, no, I'm sorry.
The question from Shelley Ward.
Question about, do you have a relationship with the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts? And if you want to mention that.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning it. Yes. So the Yiddish Book Center, I do have a relationship with them, an informal relationship as a member and as a supporter, an enormous fan. The Yiddish Book Center, very briefly, is on the grounds of Hampshire College in Western Massachusetts, close to the Berkshires. Beautiful, beautiful campus of all places.
Amherst. In Amherst.
Yeah, Amherst. Yeah. Very close to
Apple Orchard.
Yeah, I believe it's on the campus of Hampshire, the Hampshire College, though. Actually,
yes.
The campus itself. Yeah. And it is the most important center in the world. The founder, about 40 years ago, started rescuing Jewish books, Yiddish books from the garbage in New York City. And he started collecting books that people were throwing out when their older relatives were dying. He walked around with a push cart around New York City and grabbed books out of the garbage. People started calling him up and donating books. They now have the largest collection of Yiddish books in the world in a vault, which is anti-rain, anti-snow, anti-nuclear Holocaust, God forbid. And they have computerized almost all the books. You can go on their website. You can read any book. You can take their courses. You can listen to their songs. You can listen to their lectures. It's an amazing place. Most of their activities are free of charge. And it's an incredible place doing amazing work for the preservation of this language that we love so much. So I highly recommend it.
Yes. I just want to mention our library is a member of the Yiddish Book Center. And I'm showing the latest edition of Packentrager. It's like a religious experience going there. I love it. Been there 3 times. I'll go back.
All right. Well, we're going to turn it over to Ronnie to close us out.
Okay. Well, we've been schmoozing and plotzing and kvelling, and we're totally verklempt for your marvelous presentation. On behalf of the ganze Mishpacha of Temple Beth Sisterhood, we would sincerely like to thank you, Professor Jeffrey Weinstock. You have entertained us, informed us, and made us eager to speak Yiddish. You are a true mensch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for your wonderful questions. Your attention was delightful. I'm honored to have taken part in a Beth Am event. I really appreciate it.
In addition, I just have a few announcements. Sisterhood has so many wonderful programs, and we hope that many of you will register for some of the upcoming events. The first one we have is our Sisterhood Book Club on March 4th. The book is Akin by Emma Donahue. On March 18th, we have Passover, South Florida style, with Chef Aaron Drellinger of Florida Hospitality Group. He will show us how to make some very unique dishes using some local produce and products from our own backyard. It is sure to please your palate. Amanda Gluck will also be on hand to show us how to set a magnificent Passover table. On March 23rd, please join us for a wonderful mixed media art program. This will be a hands-on experience chaired by Pamela Lear and Susan Galinsky. But hurry to register because there are limited availability. There's only 20 seats available. So you can register for all of these programs at tbam.org/sisterhood. In addition, we have a program that is being put on by the Miami area of Jewish Reform Temples. This is on March 17th. The author is Mara B. Gad, and she will be talking about her book, The Color of Love. Her book is a memoir about a mixed race Jewish girl. Sisterhood read this book in book club. And for this, you can register at tiny.cc/MART2021. Also, if you have not yet joined Sisterhood, we would love to have you as a Sisterhood member. And Andrea, I must say that when I hear Ofen Pripachik, I am just verklempt because my mother also sang that all the time. And we actually sang it, Kendra Nelson sang it at her funeral. So that really brought a lot of tears to my eyes. But thank you again, everyone. Thank you for being here. We really enjoyed Professor Jeffrey Weinstock, and please come and register for some of our other wonderful programs. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank
I want
you
to
so
echo,
much.
Rabbi
Thank you all.
Alexi's plug for Purim this Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you then. We had a great Purim meal ahead for you. He did. The professor did a nice plug for Purim at the beginning, so I'm going to follow it up.
That was good.
Yeah.
I made my first Hamantaschen last night.
Ah.
I've never done it before.
Wow.